Since I've had a lot of requests for reloading, but I really don't want to make a reloading video because, you know, I don't want people to go out there and copy exact charge weights and, you know, maybe they're overpressure in their particular rifles and they blow something up. I don't want to do that. So I purposely, for many years, have tried to avoid doing actual loading in a lot of my videos. But, you know, I'm feeling generous today. I'm going to do a little bit of load development and kind of bring you along with me. I'm not going to go through every step, but I'm going to give you some pointers along the way. The reason for this is because a good friend of mine purchased an old 300 H&H, and he can't get it to shoot good. I mean, he was texting me pictures of his targets, and he reloads too. He's not a very experienced reloader, and I don't think he goes through maybe the proper load development process. He's one of those guys that just kind of goes online and sees what other people are loading and tries to copy those loads, I think. So, but anyways, he's really inspired by my 300 H&H performance, and, you know, he wants the same thing. And, you know, he wants to carry around this classic cartridge. Unfortunately, he can't get this rifle to shoot under 6-inch groups. I mean, he showed me one group, and it was, I mean, this thing had to be 12 inches, and there wasn't flyers everywhere. I mean, it was an evenly dispersed pattern, but it was a big group. And I tried to give him some pointers on, you know, finding the optimal charge weight and tweaking seating depth and doing different things. And he just seemed real frustrated with the whole process. So he made a proposition to me. Basically, he'd give me a couple thousand match primers and a couple pounds of a powder I really want to use. And in return, he just wants me to do load development for this rifle. And, you know, he understands I might not be able to get tiny little quarter-inch groups out of it, but he's looking for at least MOA. I mean, he already stated he knows it's an old gun. He knows the barrel's not in the best condition, and he'll be happy with MOA. And I'm pretty sure I can get that. We'll see, though. Basically, he lives in California with me, so he needs to use non-lead ammunition, and he really wants to use that 175 grain Barnes LRX. That's what I use in my 300 H&H, and he went out, and I told him not to do this. It was against my advice. He went out and bought like 400 bullets of this. You know, I told him not to do it, just to buy 1 or 2 boxes and do load development with that and see if his rifle even likes it, but he didn't. He went out and bought hundreds of bullets, so he's kind of stuck using this too. So basically, he's giving me all these free reloading components, and I'm going to try to find a load for him. So I hope you enjoy this part of the video. The brass I use for my 300 H&H loads, and the brass I use for most of my loads if I can, is Nosler brass. Basically, there's only 2 brands of brass that I don't weight sort. I don't even bother with weight sorting them. And that's the Nosler or Norma brass, same thing, or the Lapua brass. Lapua brass is just the best quality brass I've ever used. So, and I've actually sat down, and I used to weight sort this stuff. I gave up on it. It's not even worth my effort to weight sort this because the quality of it's so good. So this is what I start with. And if you're using virgin brass, don't expect a lot with your virgin brass loads. I mean, really, even if you're meticulous with virgin brass, your loads are probably just going to be slightly better than a factory load because, this isn't really fit to your chamber yet. And this stuff, in my experience, comes really undersized. So you need a firing on it. Once you fire this and you're working the brass and loading it on the second loading, that's when you start to see the real accuracy benefits of reloading. But always start with good brass. I mean, the worst brass I've used is Federal. If you buy Federal brass, make damn sure you weight sort that stuff and really check everything out because that brass is very inconsistent. But if you start with Nosler, Norma, or Lapua brass, you're already way ahead of the game. And the brass I'm working with today is Nosler 300 H&H brass, and this is going to be its third firing. This has already been fired twice. This is going to be its third firing. And this brass has been fired twice already, so I'm prepping it for the third firing. And basically, this is the last time I'm going to prep it before I start the annealing process. So after I fire it this third time, before I fire it the fourth time, I'll anneal it. So I'm not going to be doing any annealing during prep of this brass. But what I'm going to do as a first step is I'm going to deprime it first. I'm going to decap my brass, and I use a separate press for that. This is set up for depriming. And the reason I do that is twofold, actually. Number one, I like, when I tumble my brass, I like that primer pocket to get cleaned out, so I want the primer out of there. And number two, on my full-length size dies, I have the decapper and the expander ball out of those, so there's nothing in those dies to do that during that step anyway. So I always start, first thing I do is decap my brass, so let's get started with that. I'm going to go ahead and wet tumble this brass now in my Frankfurt Arsenal tumbler, which I really like. Now there's various types of case lubes that can be used for the resizing process. Basically, if I'm doing a small batch, like just loading, maybe 20 up to 50 cartridges at a time, I might just sit by my press and, individually use this Imperial Sizing Wax right here. And this Imperial Sizing Wax is the best of the best. I mean, I've never, ever had a stuck case in my life while using this, ever. The Imperial Dry Neck Lube, the only time I really use this in my process, because I don't neck size only anymore, is I use this when I run an expander mandrel down the neck for neck sizing. And then we have probably the most misunderstood case lube, and that's Hornady's One Shot. And just about everybody you see complain about this use it wrong. First of all, before you use this, you need to completely clean out your die. I mean, I use brake clean and everything on it. You need to completely clean out your sizing die of whatever other kind of lube you've been using, especially if you've been using this Imperial wax. You need to get all of that out of here before you use the One Shot. For some odd reason, I know it's hard to explain. I've heard it before. I didn't believe it at first, but now I'm a believer that this Imperial Sizing Wax and One Shot are not compatible with each other. You don't want to mix and match these. So when you're going back and forth between these, make sure that you clean your sizing die down to bare metal. I know a lot of people also, make the homemade lanolin mixtures and everything like that, and I just don't have time to deal with that crap. And I've used it before. I had a friend whip me up a batch, and I really couldn't tell the difference between using that or anything else. But this One Shot right here, as long as you clean your die down to bare metal before you use it. And another thing people do wrong with this is this One Shot, actually, after you spray it on your cases, it needs to sit for a while, because basically it has some, it has that alcohol base in it. So when you apply it on it, basically that alcohol-based solution kind of flashes off, and it leaves the dry lubricant on the cases. So after you spray down your cases, all around with this stuff, they actually need to sit for a while. I actually let mine sit for about 10 minutes before I'll start working with the brass. So that's another mistake people make with this one shot, is they'll spray down their brass and then go straight to the press and start trying to size. And I'll admit it, the first time I used this years ago, I did that and I ended up with a stuck case. So basically I only use this for large batches. If I'm doing a lot of reloading on a large batch, I don't want to sit there and rub wax on constantly on every case. I'll use this one shot. I'll lay out all of my brass standing up and I'll go over it, you know, all around on all sides with it. And I'll let it sit for about 10 minutes or so before I even start working on the brass. And of course, I learned the hard way also. If you're switching back and forth between different types of lubricant, you need to completely clean out your die. And then you have the old school way of getting it done. And that's basically these case lube pads where you roll your cases around in here before you size them. And it works. I mean, it's old school. It works. But for those really tough sizing jobs, you know, you get some brass, especially like the short magnums and stuff. And maybe you have a loose chamber and a tight die. You know, this isn't going to work as well as Imperial Sizing Wax will, but that's the old school way to get things done. And, you know, I lubed up cases this way for about probably 14, 15 years, and it just flat out works. There's no reason to look down upon lubing your cases that way. These Mech Marksman presses are super smooth. I mean, look at that. Bam. That's full-length resize right there. Like, no effort at all. And before I get too far in this video about full-length resizing, which you should be doing, not shoulder neck sizing, you should be doing a full-length resizing on your hunting ammo. But one of the things you should also be doing with that is you should be using a comparator to measure the brass before and after you size it, to make sure you're bumping back the shoulder properly. You know, some competition shooters only bump the shoulder back 1/1000th or 1/2 and most hunters go 2, 3, 4,000ths bump. I personally like to bump my shoulders 2,000ths. Especially if, you know, if I'm going to be firing the brass out of the same rifle that it was fire formed in. But I get a lot of comments from new reloaders telling me, Desert Dog, I full-length resized my brass and the shoulder actually grew longer instead of bumping back. Why is that? You know, and they go to the internet to get their question answered and get all kinds of stupid, nonsensical answers for it, when the answer is pretty simple. If you're full-length resizing and your brass is growing rather than shrinking, it's because your shell, your casing isn't going all the way in to the resizing die. And basically what it's doing is it's resizing all of this and stretching it up, but it's not going in far enough to bump this shoulder as the last step. And the reason for that is you're either mixing and matching shell holders or you're using the wrong shell holder. You know, even though both of these shell holders are for the same family of bullets, they have different deck heights. You know, this is a Hornady shell holder. And you can see the Hornady shell holder has a deck height of 124 thousandths. And this is a RCBS shell holder for the same cartridges. And you can see that has a deck height of 131 thousandths. I mean, that's a big difference right there. And the problem is if I set up this full-length resizing die, if this full-length resizing die is made to bump back a shoulder a couple of thousandths using a shell holder with a deck height of 125 thousandths, and I use this shell holder that has a deck height of 131 thousandths, it's not even going to touch the neck on this when it goes into the full-length resizing die. And what it's going to do is, as it goes in, this brass is going to get stretched up, and the shoulder's never going to get bumped back. So make sure you test your shell holders with your die. I mean, put your die in, set it up how you're supposed to. Your die should be touching the shell holder at full extension, or maybe even a little bit more camming over. And then, resize it and check the shoulder and make sure you're getting the bump. If it's growing, it's because your shell holder has too much deck height on it. And along these same lines, if you're using the Hornady lock and load system, and these bushings have this rubber O-ring on it, when you come all the way up to full extension on your press to size the die, it's gonna push up against this. So you got a little bit of play here that you need to compensate for. So you may have to set your press to where not only does it make contact with the shell holder, your full-length sizing die, but maybe cams over a little bit and pushes up higher. So if I use these Hornady lock and load bushings, I'll have it contact the shell holder, and then I'll maybe adjust down an extra quarter to a half a turn on that. That way I know that my case is going all the way into the sizing die. And a good thing to do is, usually with my set of dies, when I have it in the box, I usually have a dedicated shell holder with those dies, because what you'll find out is, even if you're using Lyman shell holders or RCBS shell holders or Hornady shell holders, the exact same shell holder with the exact same number on it, sometimes those will have different deck heights, even the same brand. So I like to keep a dedicated shell holder in each of my die cases, and I use that with that set. Also, sometimes you can't find the right size to fit your die. And if that's the case, Lyman and Redding both make shell holder kits that come in different thicknesses, just for this reason. Now I'm going to trim some brass. If I'm doing really big lots, I always use my Frankfurt Arsenal, automatic trimmer. But when I'm doing small lots, I take the opportunity to kind of control the situation a little bit better. And, I kind of enjoy doing things by hands a lot of the time. And I really love these Forster original trimmers. I have several of these for different cartridges, and I have them set for that particular cartridge. And, I change the tips out on these for carbide tips too, for carbide cutters. And that's generally what I use. I use the Forster original trimmer for most common size bottleneck cartridges, like, anything up to 375 H&H maybe. But for my big bore ammo, I use the Forster classic trimmer. And that's how I, if I'm going to trim 458 lot or something like that, I'll use my Forster classic trimmer. And if you plan on crimping your ammo, especially, this isn't match ammo, this is hunting ammo. If I get above 300 Win Mag, start shooting 338 Win Mag and go up to 375 H&H, I always crimp those loads, because I don't want that movement in the magazine. But just remember that if you're going to crimp them, and I always use the Lee factory crimp die for crimping, your trimming has to be spot on to have consistency with that Lee factory crimp die. That is 100% dependent on having your brass length exact. So trimming is important. Well, now that I got all my brass wiped clean, it's time to chamfer and deburr these. You know, whether you use a case prep center like I usually do, I usually use my Frankfurt Arsenal case prep center when I'm doing large lots of brass, or if you're doing a small lot of brass like I'm doing here, just 30 rounds, I might do it by hand. But no matter what system you use for deburring and chamfering, if your chamfer tool has a profile like that, and you're shooting one of these long modern bullets, like maybe a high BC VLD or ELDX, or even an Accubon long range, or you're shooting a copper bullet like what I'm loading here, the copper bullets have to get their weight by lengthening the profile of the bullet. If you're using one of a chamfer with a profile like that, you're probably noticing a whole lot of shavings from either the copper jacket or, you know, brass or copper projectile. You'll notice a lot of shavings when you're seating the bullet in the case if you chamfer with one of these. That's because you need a chamfer with that kind of profile, like this. You know, years ago in the early 2000s when I was shooting competition and everybody went away from the old Sierra Match Kings and started shooting these long, heavy for caliber VLDs, everybody just started tearing up their bullet jackets when they seated bullets, and you know they had to start using these. So your chamfer profile should look like that, and if you chamfer with a tool like this, you're not going to get those shavings when you seat bullets anymore. And you can see that nowadays, just about any case prep center you buy comes with these 28 or 22 degree chamfer tools instead of those old 45 degree ones. Like I said, these are better for the longer, more modern high BC bullets. And also, even when you use older style flat base bullets, the bullets seem to seat a lot easier and take a lot less initial pressure while you're seating the bullet. So I actually prefer these VLD style chamfering tools a lot better than the old 45 degree ones for just about all types of reloading. And now I'm going to prime my brass. For large lots of brass or just plinking ammo or something like that, yeah, I'll bench prime it. But if I really care about accuracy, man, I'm a real stickler for hand priming. And I love my K&M hand priming tool. I mean, I like to prime by feel when you get that crush and everything. And I can just set these perfect. I mean, really precise. And, you know, I always give it a spin, hit it again. And that is almost always perfect. You know, and when I first start priming and I set it up, I always use the depth gauge on my micrometer to verify. It's perfect. The problem a lot of bench primers, when I see people prime on them, is number one, you don't get that little crush on the primer, but number two, they're often sticking out slightly on the bottom there, and that's not good. You don't want that. I don't even think that's a safe situation. So to let you know, when I'm doing small lots, I love priming by hand. You know, and one of the reasons I don't really like to bench prime, I like to hand prime. Like I said, I like that little bit of a crush fit, you know. But all primers need to bottom out in the pocket, in the primer pocket. And each different brand, and sometimes different primers of the same brand, have different thicknesses. So, you know, there's some thick primers out there that I always got to crush approximately 2 thousandths down, you know, but the seating depth on those from flush is about 2 thousandths. And then there's some primers out there where, you know, I got to go down to about 5 thousandths to get that little bit of crush on the primer. And I've even used some of those European primers, and I've had to go down 8 thousandths below flush just to to bottom out on that primer. So primer thickness is going to have a lot to do with it. That's why there is no universal priming depth. But whatever you do, your primers have to be seated all the way in. I mean, that's basically the bottom line. Whether you give it a little bit of crush or not, I think that's maybe inconsequential. But the bottom of the primer, that anvil needs to bottom out inside the primer pocket. So it can't be floating in there with space. So that's real important. Now it's time to start putting some powder in the cases, and I'm going to use my old trusty Charge Master. And of course, when I weigh up my first load, I always go back to my trusty old 505 and make sure it's reading right on. So let's go ahead and put some 4831 shortcut in these cases. You can see concentricity is just awesome with this. Looks like maybe a half a thousandth, 1,000th. Just awesome concentricity. Okay, and before I get too far into load development, especially finding optimal charge weights, I want to talk about chronographs for a little bit here, because I usually do a Satterley type test on velocity in order to find powder charge nodes. I've been doing it that way since Scott Satterley first proposed this, I think back in 2012, 2011. And ever since then, I've been using Scott Satterley's method. But instead of doing one shot for each charge weight, I usually load 3 shots per charge weight and get an average based off of that. But anyways, you heard the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, when it comes to data. Well, the same applies for optimal charge weight. If your chrono's not reading accurately, you don't have accurate results. And that leaves a lot of reloaders kind of chasing their tail with loads, wondering what's going wrong. And it's usually the chronograph. If you read Brian Litz's book, where he basically tests all of the available chronos at the time, every single one of these cheap chronos, like the Pro Chrono, the Shooting Chrony, the Caldwell one, they're all basically crap. These are not very accurate at all. I mean, they're off by 50, 60, 70 feet per second sometimes, and that's not accurate enough for load development in my mind. Not at all. So if you're serious about using the Satterley method to do load development, and this is what you have, you probably should use some other ladder technique method, a ladder test, instead of doing a Satterley test, because your chrono is going to be a problem for that. It's just not accurate enough. Now, Brian Litz, at the time of testing, basically declared that these magneto speeds are just as accurate as the old standby Oler 35s. And these are pretty cheap. I mean, a lot of these chronos that don't work very well, that are over $100, these magneto speed sport models are just a little bit more than this, but these are very, very accurate. Brian Litz had nothing but praise for this. But the only problem with this is this bayonet hooks directly on the barrel. And especially for hunting rifles, you know, with a sporter type barrel on it and everything, this changes point of aim, point of impact. So you can't really shoot for groups with this on your rifle, but it's very accurate as a chronograph. And like I said, it doesn't matter. When I used to do Satterley tests, I just go out to a field near my house and put this on my rifle and shoot into a dirt berm just to get chronograph readings. Because when you're looking for charge weights, you don't really care about groups at that point. So this is a viable option. Well, a few years after these came out and kind of revolutionized the shooting world, the Labrador came out, which is a small, portable, highly accurate Doppler radar. And this is awesome. This is a real game changer. It's got a lot of features, and it's a little bit more complicated because you need to learn everything. And, you know, you can read suppressed rimfire, pistol, rifle, just about everything, but you need to learn how to set this up right. But it works fantastic, and I believe this is what Brian Litz is using today. So this is very accurate. But I just want to say that, remember that old adage, garbage in, garbage out with your information? If you're using one of these types of chronographs, your data is garbage in, and it's going to be garbage out. And this is my setup here. Logging down velocities. Got the lab radar out. My bald eagle rest. Love that thing. My rabbit ears for the rear. Of course, my rifle cool barrel cooler. And this is pretty much my setup for load development. Okay, so I went out and did some optimal charge weight testing, and you could see that, you know, these, it's a good group right there, but you could see that I'm not getting 6-inch groups here, 8-inch groups, whatever he was getting, but they're not great either. But I wasn't looking for groups today. I'm doing an optimal charge weight test, and he'd stated that he'd worked up to 69.6 grains of H4831 shortcut, and that he wasn't getting any overpressure signs. So I went ahead and decided to start down at 68.6 grains and work my way up to 70.2 grains, 3 shots of each. And you saw I meticulously loaded these because I wanted extreme accuracy and consistency with these loads, because in this portion of the test, we're not looking for groups. You know, certainly I got a couple of really good groups out of this, but I'm not looking for groups right here. I'm looking for velocity nodes right here. This is just for powder charge. And you could see I graphed it, and I was really hoping for an accuracy node up here higher, especially since I wasn't getting pressure signs. You know, maybe I can go farther than this. Maybe I can go up to maybe 70.6 grains or so right here, but I really don't want to push it because this is a hunting cartridge. So I don't want to be hovering around max pressure. I don't know if this guy's going to, you know, start mass producing his loads on a progressive press using a powder measure instead of a scale. So I don't know that, but this is what I'm really liking right here. You can see this is an accuracy node right here around 69 grains. And, you know, this only deviated between 68.8 and 69.2 by about 7 feet per second. So that's a good extreme spread right there. So basically I'm going to load some rounds with 69 grains and start playing with seating depth to try to get accuracy based off of this velocity node. So that's coming next. Okay, now that charge weight testing's done, and I've settled on 69 grains to try out, I'm going to load up a bunch of brass with 69 grains of H4831 shortcut, and I'm going to start testing out seating depth to try to find an accuracy node now. So let's get to loading. Exactly 2,000 shoulder bump. And the great thing compared to other belted Magnums, the 300 H&H, especially even more so than the 375 H&H, where a lot of Magnums, you have to use the neck collet size dies and a bunch of stuff. Using a regular full-length size die with the 300 H&H Magnum really doesn't destroy brass or mess brass up that long, because this really doesn't have much of a shoulder on it. I mean, it definitely can't headspace off that shoulder. So when you full-length size this, it doesn't lead to premature case head separations and other issues you have with cartridges like the 7mm Rem Mag. This stuff actually sizes well, and 300 H&H brass, especially this nozzler brass, will actually last for a lot of loadings. It's actually really good stuff. Look how smoothly that sizes. This is one of the smoothest sizing cartridges ever. Just super easy. And before we go any further, I want to talk about powders for a second. There's a reason why I chose H4831 shortcut for this load. Basically, when loading for the 300 H&H Magnum or the 300 Winchester Short Magnum, which shares basically almost the exact same case capacity as the 300 H&H, when I'm loading this, I like to use H4350 when I'm shooting the lighter bullets, the 150s, 165s, 168s. But when I move up to the 180s, or the 175s, 180s, or 200s, I find that the H4831 range of powders suits that bullet weight a little bit better, because, they're a little bit slower burning. Now, the reason I like this particular powder is that I can load these 175s and 180s, and I could put 69 to 70 grains of powder in here without compressing it, but have, around 95 to 98% case fill on it. What a lot of people don't realize is that having empty space in your case is very bad for consistency. It's bad for both accuracy and precision, which are, a lot of people don't know this. Accuracy and precision are two different things. But you want to fill this case as high as you can without compressing the load. You want to minimize the dead space inside this case. So these loads right here, by my estimation, with this nozzler brass, I'm at about 96% case capacity on this. So I'm really happy with these loads, but that's another reason why I choose the powders that I do. It's not just because it fits within the burn rate I like. I'm also looking for that maximum case capacity fill without compressing the load. And when you're doing your bullet seating depth tests, these micrometer seating dies, in my opinion, are an absolute must. I mean, it'd be so hard to do seating depth tests really without a good micrometer die. You know, whether you're using the top of the line RCBS or Hornady or Redding or Forster micrometer seating dies, they're all worth it. And basically, all of these dies, when I adjust them for 1/1000ths, it's pretty exact on changing 1/1000ths in seating, in actual seating depth. So, these are, in my mind, an absolute necessity when you want to get serious about trying out different bullet jumps. So, highly recommend micrometer dies. And even if you have just a standard Hornady or Redding die, you can buy the micrometer part of it, the micrometer seater, separately, and always add it to your regular standard seating dies. So that's always a good option. I've converted lots of my Hornady and Redding dies over to micrometers because they're so useful. Another point I want to bring up here with seating is that with anything with reloading, accuracy comes with consistency. I mean, it's no different than when you're set up on the shooting bench trying to shoot for groups. You want to be very consistent with how you hold your rifle, the pressure you put on your rifle. Well, it's the same with seating bullets. On most of these presses, basically when you're seating bullets, the pressure and how you operate the handle on the press will often determine variances you have in seating depth. So you want to be consistent with your seating. I like to kind of come up and then gently hit the end. I like to come up and then gently hit the end. I don't like to slam it down like that. That's when you get a lot of inconsistency. Also, I've seen some people that like to work their die down so that the ram comes to a dead stop on the bottom of the seating die. And some people report that they get a lot of consistency like that, but I really don't like putting the jamming the shell holder up against my expensive seating dies. So just as long as you're pulling this handle exactly the same with the same amount of pressure each time, you'll get a lot more consistency with seating depth. Well, I ran a seating depth test on this, and as you can see, it is pretty erratic. I mean, I got some groups up here over 2 inches. That's not good in my opinion. But down here, there was an accuracy node for the seating depth down here between 58 thousandths and 61 thousandths. And that's a pretty good accuracy node. I mean, that's about a 1/2 inch right there. But it's a very narrow accuracy mode because look at, you go down 3 grains and it jumps to over 1 inch, and you go up 3 grains and it goes up to over 1 inch. So that's a pretty narrow window right there. I'd make sure I had a really good seating die to stay in this range right here. So I think I'm going to load up for my final testing at 60 thousandths jump. It seems like if I put it at 60 thousandths off the lands, if my seating die goes off a couple of thousandths here or there, I'll still be in this accuracy node, I think. I know my ammo was damn good because you see the first 24 shots I fired, the extreme spread was 17, and the standard deviation was only 6.34. I mean, that's some damn good loaded ammo. I definitely did my job reloading and took, that variable out of it. And you'll notice shots number 25 through 30 the velocity dropped, 25 to 32 feet per second from the average of the first 24 shots. So basically what that says is when I got about 70 thousandths off the lands, velocity took a plummet and so did accuracy. So this particular rifle does not like being jumped 70 thousandths or, in that range right there. Definitely doesn't like it. And it definitely doesn't like being too close to the lands either. So, Barnes recommends 50 thousandths as a starting point and to work your way back from 50 thousandths. And, once again, Barnes' testing proves to be true in real life in my experience. And, 60 thousandths was the sweet spot for this rifle. So I'm going to load up some ammo at 69 grains of H4831 shortcut with 60 thousandths jump, and we're going to see where we're at there. Since we're using these LRXs in this load development, there's one thing I want to point out here. These LRXs have that longer, pointier profile on the front of them, which, in my experience, makes them a lot more sensitive to seating depth than the regular TSXs and the TTSXs. These TTSXs really aren't highly sensitive to seating depth, in my opinion. Your seating depth can vary by about, 10, 15 thousandths, and they'll still shoot almost the same. The LRX isn't like that. The LRX, you got to make sure you're kind of in that seating depth node for accuracy. Otherwise, you're not going to have accuracy. So be mindful if you're going to use these LRXs, which are awesome bullets. They're a lot more sensitive to seating depth than the regular TSXs or the TTSXs. All right, so I have my ammo loaded up at that 60 thousandths jump with 69 grains of H4831, and I'm going to the range tomorrow, and the owner of the rifle is going to meet me out at the range because I want him to shoot some groups too, because a lot of times what I find is that it's people's shooting technique. Too many people in modern American society, we're learning our rifle trade from a lot of wannabe snipers and, bench rest or precision shooters. And a lot of that shooting technique does not translate into the hunting world. For instance, if you're on a bench with the rest doing load development, you do not want to fire a lightweight sporter rifle in a Magnum caliber and free recoil. You're just asking for vertical stringing and bad groups doing that. So I want to kind of look at his technique and shoot some groups next to him so we can kind of see how I shoot compared to how he shoots. So I'm going to get everything loaded up and make a range trip in the morning. So we're going to go out to the range and be real careful and real meticulous and try to shoot some good groups and basically see where we're at with this load we've been working on. Okay, so we're back from the range and I'm going to give you the results and analyze the results a little bit. As soon as I put that rifle up, I immediately shot a 5-shot group. Yeah, pretty good. That's about 0.6. So then I put him behind the same rifle and this is the group he shot. The first two were good, and then it started going all over the place. And I attribute that to bad bench technique. You know, he's one of those people that want to shoot like a super sniper and, you know, put their support hand underneath the rear bag and squeeze it and everything like that. And with that lightweight 300 H&H, you're just asking for a lot of muzzle jump. And I had to correct him. He believed the old wives' tale that the bullet leaves the barrel before the rifle starts to recoil. Of course, that defies the laws of physics. I mean, the rifle starts moving before the bullet leaves the barrel. So that caused that. So I helped him out a little bit more, put him on the rifle again for a few more shots, and had him hold the forend. And he shot this group, which isn't bad. That's kind of a flyer right there. And I don't think he had his support elbow planted good while he was holding the forend, and it shifted a little bit on that. So I took the rifle back and I put my GoPro down range, and I shot this group. You know, I don't know what happened on this first shot. You'll see it on the video here I'm about to post, but that first shot went right there, and then I basically just slammed the next 4 shots right through that hole right there. So if I take that out of the equation, this is about a 0.57, 0.58 group. And if I add this into it, it's like a 0.92 inch group. So, you know, it is what it is. So then I put him behind the rifle one last time. We had 3 more rounds left, and he was real careful, and he shot this group, which is pretty damn good. That's a sub-MOA little group right there. I don't know how it would have been with 5 shots, but that's a pretty decent group right there. So, you know, I could say with certainty, with a careful reloader loading the ammo, and somebody who's really experienced behind a lightweight Magnum rifle off the bench rest, you can expect just over a half MOA out of that gun with the Barnes LRX. And if you're a novice, if you're a novice shooter at the bench, you know, you could probably expect sub MOA with decent technique with that rifle and the Barnes LRX. So not bad. Overall, he's happy. Of course, he's happier with my groups than he is with his groups, but he's happy nonetheless. And you know, we got another 300 H&H convert out there on the hunting grounds in California, which I'm personally proud of. And no, there's a reason I didn't show the rifle or the person I did this loading for, because he asked me to remain completely anonymous for personal reasons, and I'm going to respect that. But hopefully you enjoyed this bonus video. You maybe learned a thing or two from it, or maybe you can comment below and teach me a thing or two. Now, in order to do accurate load development off the bench, you need to have a steady system. I just watched a video on YouTube of this guy. He recently posted it too, of this guy. Wasn't a joke or a parody video. This guy was serious. He was doing load development with 35 Whelen, and he was going out and trying to show you how he shoots groups for his to determine which seating depth is the best. And the guy literally had a piece of plywood on the front of a shooting table sitting up, and he was balancing the rifle on a piece of rocking plywood, shooting groups like that, you know. And I don't know how you take that seriously, but don't do anything like that. Get some solid rest. I mean, Caldwell and Sinclair make some good solid rest. This is my Bald Eagle rest, and I absolutely love this rest. Get a good set of rabbit ears on the back, and you know, you want them to kind of go in and fall to the bottom of those rabbit ears too, so it's solid, and then adjust the front up and down, or move the rear bag forward and back for elevation. But you want to start off with a solid rest system. Otherwise, you're just not going to shoot good groups. So the first thing I want you to do is grab your books on bench rest, F-class shooting, and tactical super sniper shooting, and get your Best of the West DVD collection and throw it in the trash right now, because that doesn't apply to when you're using a real hunting rifle that you use out in the field with no muzzle brake. Maybe it's a lightweight, heavy recoiling Magnum, and you need to do precision load development off the bench. You know, what you need to understand is the free recoil technique that most precision shooters use, or even, you know, what the military teaches, where you get your support hand and you put it underneath and you shoot like that. You know, this technique is basically, it works because a rifle like this, number one, is heavy. Number two, usually has a muzzle brake on the end of it. And number three is usually shooting a cartridge that by hunting standards really doesn't recoil much. I mean, if you really think your 308 or your 6.5 has a lot of recoil, you really need to man up, because it really doesn't. But when you get up to lightweight hunting rifles, you know, like a 6, 7, maybe even 8-pound Magnum with no muzzle brake on it, a real hunting rifle, you know, this almost free recoiling technique where you shoot like this, it isn't going to cut the mustard. You know, this is more indicative of a real hunting rifle. I mean, if a guy was going to spend 4 or 5 days up in the backcountry of the Rockies hiking around on an elk hunt, this is the type of rifle he would have. You know, this is a, you know, with scope and everything on it, basically a 7-pound 338 Win Mag. And, you know, it's got a good bite to it. But, you know, the idea here is that you're only going to take one shot on that trip. And only that one shot matters. This rifle wasn't made for competition shooting or bench rest shooting or best of the West 1,000-yard target practice or anything like that. It was made to comfortably carry around in the mountains for days and to take one shot on that trophy of your dreams. But if you shot this rifle, you know, if you went with the traditional technique here of bringing this, your support hand under, you know, and lightly holding this rifle, you know, they teach you just to barely rest your thumb on top of it and maybe put your fingertips on the palm swell and just mainly contact with the tip of your finger to pull back to gently break the trigger. If you do that with this rifle is going to go bam up in the air. And it's not going to shoot accurate groups. It's just not going to do it. With a rifle like this, with a real Magnum caliber lightweight hunting rifle, you need to control the rifle. You actually have to get in it and control it. And I know what a lot of you tactical American sniper types or F-class shooters are going to be like, well, you can't shoot accurate groups if you don't do that. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. You can. You can control a rifle through recoil off the bench and shoot accurate groups. It's just not as easy to do. This technique that they teach people in shooting schools to shoot like this, that's the easy way to shoot accurate groups. They teach you that because it's easy. I mean, they're basically teaching you the lowest common denominator, and that's the easiest way to shoot an accurate group. But you can hold the rifle tightly and control the rifle and still shoot accurate groups, but it's just harder to do because you need to have consistency throughout more processes. And how you're going to do this is, first of all, that grip where you just barely put your thumb and maybe your forefingers on the palm swell and barely touch the trigger and gently pull back with the pad of your finger. That isn't really going to work in this scenario. You need to pull the rifle into you. You need to pull it in hard. You know, not super hard. You're not muscling it, but you need to pull it in reasonably hard. And then you need to control the fore-end from muzzle rise. And there's a few ways to do this. I mean, you can loop the sling around there and you can hold the sling down, which is a method I really don't prefer because I don't like putting lateral pressure on the rifle. Another technique you can use, a lot of people use this to good effect, is to put your hand on top of the scope while you're shooting groups. And that actually works pretty good. But the problem with it is you need to really plant this elbow down perfectly because you can because of you're putting your hand up on top of the scope, it acts as a fulcrum, and it's really easy to move the rifle, to roll the rifle. Especially hunting rifles don't have this square stock on the forend. They have a rounded forend. So if you put your hand up here, it's easy to roll the rifle around, which I don't like to do, but this method works. I know a lot of people who shoot super, super accurate groups with their lightweight magnums by putting their hand on the scope. Most Africans, when they're zeroing rifles or doing load development in Africa, that's a common technique used there. What I like to do is I like to actually grip the forend, and you're not going to put a death grip on it, but you're going to grip it tightly enough, kind of like you're hunting. You're doing a normal hunt. And I like to grip that, and don't touch the barrel. Don't put your thumbs on the barrel or your fingers on the barrel. Just grab the stock, pull the butt in tight to your shoulder, hold the stock firmly, control your breathing, and use regular trigger control on it. And if you do this consistently, you'll get pretty good grips while controlling the rifle. And to tell you the truth, that's the only way to control a lightweight Magnum on the bench. It's the only way you're going to do it. Out of all these techniques, using the sling, holding the forend, holding down the scope, the one I prefer the most is holding the forend. And the reason for this is this actually translates into my field shooting positions. I don't bring a bipod out in the field or anything like that. I'm not going to set up on an elk 1,000 yards away. I'm going to stock in 100 yards from it. Maybe I can't get within 300 yards of it. Maybe I'll be making a 250, 300 yard shot, but there's no need for a bipod on my rifles. I always have a pack on me. I'll put my pack down, I'll shoot off my pack, and when I do that, I'll have my hand under the forend while I'm shooting under the pack. Also, if I'm shooting off of shooting sticks, which I'm commonly doing, I put it in the sticks, I grab the forend, I hold it. And then again, about, I'd say 30-40% of the shots I take in the field are standing offhand shots. And once again, I'm holding the forend the same way. So I just like the uniformity of no matter how I shoot, whether it's off the bench or off a pack, or shooting while kneeling, or shooting while prone with nothing, or just taking a quick snapshot offhand, I'm always holding the forend the same. And I like that uniformity. So that's why when I control the rifle, I choose to control to grip the forend to control it, rather than go like this or wrap up in the sling or do anything like that. So that's how I do that. And I know what you're saying to yourself about now. Damn, Desert Dog, shooting a really light Magnum rifle off the bench, man, that's painful. It's painful. And I agree with you, it can be. That's why I highly recommend the past Magnum Recoil Pad. Anytime I do load development off the bench with anything over a 30-06, I have my past Magnum Recoil Pad on, and I don't feel it. Seriously, I don't feel any recoil on any of my rifles up to 458 when I wear these. They're a worthy investment, and they make load development on these rifles real easy and comfortable. And if you don't have one of these, what I do a lot of the times, I might be in Africa with a dangerous game rifle, or maybe I took my 375 H&H to Africa or something like that, or my 338 Win Mag. And what I'll do is, when I arrive at these destinations, I need to verify that my scope's still on 0. So I'll shoot a quick 3-shot group. And, I'm not going to have my past recoil pad or anything like that with me. So what I do is I always have a beanie with me, a watch cap, usually during hunting seasons, the morning or night's cold, or maybe it's cold all day. And what I do is I'll fold the beanie in half, and I'll tuck it inside my jacket or shirt right there in the pocket of my shoulder. And I'll shoot like that. And it really works. I mean, it sounds so simple and stupid, but doing that really, really takes most of the bite out of these Magnums when you're shooting off the bench. So that's kind of a low-tech method at recoil reduction. And now I want to talk about doing load development on the bench with the real heavy kickers, with the dangerous game rifles, man. With your 416s, your 458s, your 505s. You know, you really don't want to put these on a front rest or sandbag with a little bean bag or a rabbit ear behind it to shoot these things off the bench to do load development. I mean, hell no. The best way to do this is to use a lead sled. I mean, these things are really a lifesaver. These things get a bad rap from, you know, basically internet trolls who've never used them, because there's a few people out there that initially, when these came out, that used them wrong. Basically, these are meant to put a little bit of weight down in this tray right here to take some of the recoil out of the rifle. And what I found is if you put 20, 25 pounds of weight on this and you're shooting a 458 lot, it takes about 75% of the recoil out of it, yet it lets the rifle move. The rifle needs to, even in this solid rig like this, the rifle still needs to move a little bit. You don't want the wood in the stock absorbing 100% of the recoil. You want a little bit of movement. So the worst thing you can do with this is to put too much weight on it. You know, if you're putting 40, 50 pounds on this, you're putting way too much weight on it. You're not going to get enough free movement out of it. And never ever, I see people put a strap over the front right here to control muzzle jump. Never do that. Basically, you know, the way I showed you before, where you're going to grip the forearm and kind of come up like that, that's how you're going to shoot. You're going to control the muzzle rise by holding the forend on this with your elbow firmly planted, and the recoil that goes back into your shoulder is going to be controlled to a large extent by the weight on this rig right here. So as long as you don't strap the front end down and you don't put more than 25 pounds on the lead sled, this is the way to go for load development with the heavy hitting dangerous game calibers. You know, it was a real journey. It always is when you do load development. It's almost like going on a hunt. You know, it's an experience and a process that you go through, and you really don't forget it. And load development on a rifle is a certain way. You usually, you know, when I pull a rifle out of the safe and look at it, a lot of times, you know, not only do I remember hunts with that rifle, but I remember the load development process that I went through with that particular rifle. So, you know, it's almost a rite of passage for the reloader and the hunter. But I just want to reiterate in this video, you know, this process, you know, it may seem like I go through a little bit for just regular hunting ammo, that maybe I'm a little bit anal in my process that I go through. But, you know, when I competition shoot, I go even worse than this. I don't even seat bullets on my single stage presses. I use an arbor press with Wilson chamber dies to do that. And, you know, I get even more anal with that. But for load development like this, you know, you got to be as stringent as you can. You know, maybe not so much with, you know, when you're doing your charge weight test, you know, you need to make sure that you're right there within that 1/10 of a grain. You know, don't use a powder throw to do an optimal charge weight test. I mean, even if, you know, you don't have a good digital scale or good digital measuring system, you know, break out the old 505 beam scale and, you know, meticulously weigh everything out to the grain, to the 1/10 of a grain, because you need that when you're finding that optimal charge weight. Because, you know, just being a few grains, you know, 2 to 3 grains either direction can really throw you out of that node. And it's the same with seating depths. You know, some bullets aren't very sensitive to seating depth. And, you know, like a Nosler partition or a lot of flat-based bullets or even a TSX isn't that sensitive to seating depth. But when you get into some of these really long high BC bullets, some of them are, especially the ones with the thicker bonded core, you know, they tend to be really sensitive to seating depth. I mean, that long range AccuBond is one of them too. And, you know, if you're not really good in your bullet seating practices and consistent with it, you know, you could get thrown right out of that node, out of that accuracy node for seating depth. So the process I usually go through is I do a optimal charge weight test on it, whether you're using the Satterley method or a modified version of that, or doing a old school ladder test, you're basically looking for velocity and pressure nodes. Well, pressure is velocity, but you're looking for that velocity pressure node in that, and you're not really shooting for groups yet. And what I find is once I find that, I can load inside one of those pressure nodes and then start moving my seating depth around, and I could fine tune accuracy with seating depth. And then once I do that and find that, I'll start loading up some rounds in that for that seating depth and shooting for groups. And when you shoot for groups, I mean, you know, it's not like when you're shooting for velocities and, you know, finding out velocity and pressure, you know, your chronograph's telling you the information. There's not really a lot of human error involved in that. But when you're shooting for groups, there's actually a lot of human error involved with that. And you can get some false data if your shooting technique's not right, and you're just throwing shots off. So that's another thing to consider in all of this. Well, you know, I know most hunters out there are going to be happy going to their local store, getting a box of 30-06 core locks off the shelf, and going out and putting a deer in the freezer, and they're perfectly happy with that. And I have nothing against that. But if you're OCD about loading and having accurate hunting rifles, you know, this might be the video for you. Once again, thanks for watching and good hunting.